section on David. We need two things. The book itself that we talked about, David, written by Rabbi David Wolfe, and our Tanakh, which our Bible, which we'll be using today since we didn't have the slides, but we're only going to be in one or two chapters of it today, so we're not going to do a lot of flipping back and forth. I'm sorry. Okay. Well, last time, Richard, you had your hand out.
Fixed.
Huh, Richard?
Hang on. I don't know what she did.
I didn't touch anything.
There we go. All right.
Okay. Well, last time we began with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, traced this all the way down to David through Moses and Joshua and the tribal confederacy we had for 200 years. And the time now is about 1,000 before the Common Era, or 3,000 years ago. And the people wanted a king because they had tribes in those days. And Samuel, who was the prophet and the judge at that time, and God were against it, but God said, let them have it. And they chose Saul. God chose Saul, and Saul didn't work out. So then God sent Samuel, Jesse's family, 8 children, 7 of them were standing there, and God said, no, it's not one of these. And he says, do you have any other children? Jesse said, well, I got one out in the back. He's tending the sheep. And Samuel said, well, bring him in. And God says, that's the guy. So this was where we left off last time. The question is, how does David get to meet Saul? We got 2 kings now. Saul is the present king. David is the future king. So if you'll open your book to page 4, if someone would like to read the first paragraph on page 4, it says the first encounter.
The first encounter between Saul and David is poignant or chilling. Saul's attendants, noting his dark mood, suggest finding a lad who is skilled in the lyre, an ancient musical instrument, to play and coax the melancholy king back to fitness. The initial recommendation is a powerful foreshadowing. Saul's attendant says he knows of a young man skilled in playing, a valiant fellow, a warrior, prudent in speech, a good-looking man, and the Lord is with him. With that formidable list of virtues, Saul is convinced. He seems to know of David, for he sends messengers to Jesse, asking him to send his son who is with the flock. It reinforces our understanding of David as shepherd, but also establishes the peculiar intimacy that will grow between the fading king and the rising one. Go on.
Thank you so much. That's well read. Now, if you'll turn in your Bible to 1 Samuel, verse 16.
Which page?
It's 1 Samuel, verse 16. Chapter 16, verse 14 through 23. This tells you the whole thing. This is what the crux of the whole story is about. So chapter 16, verse 14 through 23. Anybody want to read? Give you time to find it.
Now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul.
Yes.
Am I in the right place?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. And an evil spirit from the Lord began to terrify him. Saul's courtiers said to him, an evil spirit of God is terrifying you. Let our Lord give the order, and the courtiers in attendance on you will look for someone who is skilled at playing the lyre. Whenever the evil spirit of God comes over you, he will play it, and you will feel better. So Saul said to his courtiers, find me someone who can play well, and bring him to me. One of the attendants spoke up, I have observed a son of Jesse, Bethlehemite, who is skilled in music. He is a stalwart fellow and a warrior, sensible in speech and handsome in appearance, and the Lord is with him. Whereupon Saul sent messages to Jesse to say, "Send me your son David, who is with the flock." Jesse took an ass laden with bread, a skin of wine, and a kid, and sent them to Saul by his son David. So David came to Saul and entered his service. Saul took a strong liking to him and made him one of his arms bearers. Saul sent word to Jesse, "Let David remain in my service, for I am pleased with him." Whenever the evil spirit of God came upon Saul, David would take the lyre and play it. Saul would find relief and feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him.
Thank you. Excellent, Russell. The different translations, this one I have says the spirit of melancholy, but it was God that did this to Saul. And it said that Saul loved him very much. Now, that's fine. Last week I thought we'll go to chapter 2, David's loves, and it dawned on me last night, we didn't finish chapter 1. What
That's
about
what you
David
told us to
Goliath?
read.
I'm sorry?
That's what you told us to read.
Yes, but and last night it dawned on me, we didn't finish chapter 1. So we're going to hold the knowledge you have for this week till next week and give a Bible story, which I think if you took a vote would probably be one of everybody's favorite story, whether you're Jewish or not, which is
David and Goliath story.
David and Goliath. We can't pass that up. I was going to pass that up. And that happened in his youth. So if you'll forgive me, I think you'll find this very, very, not just interesting, but educational. Let's read somebody. First Samuel.
It also sets up for David for what we're going to study in chapter 2.
Terry's right. That's exactly right. So let's somebody read, please, 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 1 through 7.
All right. 17.
It really starts where Russell left off.
Yeah, but I got to get there.
1 through 7, is that what you said?
It's 17
Okay.
verses 1 through 7.
And the Philistines assembled their forces for battle. They massed at Soka of Judah and encamped at another place between Soka and Azekah. Saul and the men of Israel massed and encamped at the valley of Elah. They drew up their line of battle against the Philistines, with the Philistines stationed on one hill and Israel stationed on the opposite hill. The ravine was between them. A champion of the Philistine forces steps forward. His name was Goliath of Gath, and he was 6 cubits and a span tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he wore a breastplate of scale armor, a bronze breastplate weighing 5,000 shekels. He had bronze greaves on his legs and a bronze javelin slung from his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's bar, and the iron head of his spear weighed 600 shekels, and the shield bearer marched in front of him.
It's a tall guy. His
10
height,
foot.
yes?
10 foot. 6.5.
Exactly. Exactly. Richard's right. It's 9 foot 9 inches.
Hey,
So
Siri,
another 6'9", another 12, 13 feet.
how large is a cubit?
I'm sorry?
About 18 inches.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's from the tip of your finger, to your elbow.
That's right, Richard. Very good. And the armor weighed how much?
It says shekels, so I don't know how much a shekel is.
A shekel is half an ounce. It's 40 shekels is a pound.
Okay.
126 pounds is the man. That's what his armor weighed. And the spear was 15 pounds. This guy's a monster. Okay.
He was tall enough to play in the NBA.
And then some, and then some.
And be able to dunk with his head.
It's what was the movie that was?
I didn't get in foul trouble a lot.
He said, "You're the brute squad. You are the brute squad." That's
Right.
right.
He
So
could take a charge for sure.
yeah, the Talmud says, where did this guy come from? Who was he? Well, remember, Ruth was David's ancestor. Ruth had a sister named Orpah. Okay.
Orpah. Sister-in-law, yeah.
In the Talmud, it says that Goliath came from the line of Orpah. What do you think of that? The Talmud says he was the son of 100 fathers and one mother, whatever that means. Anyway, Goliath's dare. Now read chapter 17, 8 through 11.
He was like 9 foot tall, according to my calculations.
I'm sorry?
According to my calculations, he was around 9 foot tall.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's this guy. He
No, he's more than that.
he was something else. Okay.
18 times 6.5 cubits is 10 foot. No,
Wow.
it's 9 foot and 9 inches, so basically 10 foot.
Yeah, what Richard has is what I have, 9 foot 9 inches. Yeah. Right.
And let's remember too that the Tanakh is very made a big point out of saying that Saul stood ahead above everyone in Israel.
Yep.
So you've got a tall king, and that was a psychological advantage for him. And look at what he's coming up against now.
And you got
Somebody's
tall brother, David's tall brother. They're all tall people. David is short.
But now we're saying, yeah, you're big, but we got somebody bigger.
That's very important. And what Terry's getting at, I think, is when she says big, what is she referring to? Somebody bigger.
Physical
Height,
size.
but his person.
Right.
Yeah, very good. Now read 8 through 11, please. As he stood and called out to the big, this is
Bigger
the
boy.
last call.
8 through 11. Okay. He stopped and called out to the ranks of Israel, and he said to them, "Why should you come out to engage in battle? I am the Philistine champion, and you are Saul's servants. Choose one of your men and let him come down against me. If he bests me in combat and kills me, we will become your slaves. But if I best him and kill him, you shall be our slaves and serve us." And the Philistine ended, I herewith defy the ranks of Israel. Get me a man and let's fight it out. When Saul and all of Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and terror-stricken.
Very good. Now, what we're going to read now, this is from the book, is what Terry was saying, how important this is to David's story. Someone to read on page 6, the word.
But wasn't this the place that Saul started being diminished and really was on the slippery slope to not be the king anymore?
Yeah.
This was the beginning of that. Yep.
All right. There's someone to read page 6, starting with before taking on Goliath all the way to.
I don't have page numbers.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is on this book.
I know it is, but the Kindle copy doesn't have page
Oh,
numbers.
it's in the top. It'll be about the 3rd or 4th page. It starts out before taking on Goliath. David was sent by his father.
Okay, let me.
Or anybody.
It's in the young David chapter.
Right.
Before taking on Goliath, David was sent by his father to take food to his brothers who were already at the front. While there, David hears from the Israelite men milling about, both of Goliath's challenge and the possibility of reward for anyone who can defeat him. For the first time, David speaks. It is a biblical commonplace that a character's first words are defining.
This is very important what Terry was referring to. Go ahead.
What will be done for the man who strikes down yonder Philistine and takes away insult from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should insult the battle lines of the living God?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Here
Please.
is the characteristic Davidic combination of idealism and self-interest, mixed with stunning self-assurance. David wishes to know what is in it for him. He also feels the national and even theological affront of Goliath's impudence.
This is not physical but theological too. This is a very important concept, a threat to God. Go ahead, please, Carol.
Underlying both is a certainty that, should he choose to fight, he will win. Unlike other Jewish notables such as Moses, Jonah, or Jeremiah, David has no unease about his suitability and readiness for his mission.
Yeah, this is we talk very much about doubt in Judaism, and this prophet had that doubt. There's not David. Go ahead.
Is this the origin of our chutzpah?
It certainly is not the origin. You're exactly right, Marion. This guy, David, does not hesitate.
There's a sentence in here, though, at the very beginning of this, where it says combination of idealism and self-interest.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It goes, well, I understand the idealism, but at this point, did you believe that he was thinking about, I'm going to do this because it's going to promote myself something?
That's the question. What do you all think?
I do. I think his words, from the abundance of the house, from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh.
Good.
I think he said the first thing out of his mouth is, what's in it for somebody who does this?
Exactly.
What's in it for me?
Yeah.
And then
Huh?
God and country are second. David is first. What's in it for me? And who is this uncircumcised Philistine that comes against the army of the living God? That's second. So, but that's us.
Can I ask something, Joe?
Yes, please.
The living God. So now suddenly the king of Israel is a living God, just like the Egyptians, the pharaohs.
No,
Yeah.
he's talking about the Adonai.
Yeah.
It's capitalized in the scriptures.
Oh, yeah, I missed
in
that.
this very scary moment, he's so calculating, and balancing, okay, what's going to happen? Is this good for me? Is this not?
The living God.
All the other people are trembling.
Yeah. And remember that for 210 years of the 400, we were with a person who felt he was God, an earthly God. When we were released, we didn't really get freedom with no God. We just changed gods. We changed the earthly God to the God, the heavenly God, the living God for us. We were never really free in the sense of no restraint. And we're going to go into that at another time. But that's
He also,
yeah.
he brings the covenant into this, into his declaration. How? When he says, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? The circumcision is the sign of the covenant with the living God.
I hadn't thought of that.
And he brings that covenant into his declaration.
Excellent. And Carolyn, if you'll continue.
But wasn't Saul also hearing from the living God but ignoring it?
That was the problem. Yeah, Saul is a tragic feature, a tragic character. There's a wonderful book by Elie Wiesel called 5 Biblical Heroes, in which he discusses Saul. It's a short book, maybe 90 pages. If you really want to read, Saul deserves, if not our sympathy, certainly our empathy. Saul was not cut out for this job. He didn't want the job. He never wanted to be a better. He was a good guy. He was handsome. He was nice. He was liked. Suddenly, you're king. I don't want to be king. And it turns out he didn't do good. Did God put him there purposely to screw up? Was it an act? Who knows? But Saul was, who was it but the tallest? Was it Terry? Saul was the tallest guy around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, Don is right. Okay, and Carol, if you'll finish out that paragraph that his older brother Eli.
His older brother, Eliab, dismissive of David and upset that he has left the sheep behind, accuses him of voyeurism, a wish only to see the battle. David answers in the manner of younger brothers throughout the ages. What have I done now? It was only talk. The following verse is unobtrusive but definitive, and he turned away from him. David turns from Eliab, no longer a child, striking out on an independent destiny.
An independent destiny. He is destined for this kind of stuff. And if you read from the Tanakh, 1 Samuel chapter 17, 13, 14, and 15. What does this tell us about David?
Excuse me. The three eldest sons of Jesse had left and gone with Saul to the war.
Wait a minute.
The names.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Jesse's three eldest sons left home and followed Saul to war. Is that what we're saying? Is that where we are?
Did you say 13?
Yeah.
1 Samuel 17, 13?
Yes.
Is that where we're starting? The three eldest sons of Jesse had left and gone with Saul to the war. The names of the three sons who had gone to the war were Eliab, the firstborn, the next Abinadab, and the third Shammah, and David was the youngest. The three eldest had followed Saul, and David would go back and forth from attending on Saul to shepherd his father's flock in Bethlehem.
What does that last sentence tell you about David?
He was low on the totem pole.
I'm sorry?
He was the low man on the totem pole.
He was, and anything else?
He was acquainted in some aspect with Saul.
Uh-huh. But how about this?
He didn't shirk his duties. He still went back and took care of it.
Richard, go ahead.
He didn't shirk his duties. He went back and tended to the flocks.
He was loyal to the king and loyal to his father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about that? He didn't have to choose. All right, verse 16.
I thought he just had to go back to be the shepherd, because being a shepherd was a lowly place, and he went back to that lowly place because he didn't have the status of his older brothers.
Yep.
That's right.
And it was his job.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the next verse, 16.
The Philistine stepped forward morning and evening and took his stand for 40 days.
And this back to the war. Now think about this a minute. You're a soldier. You get up in the morning, there he is. You go to bed at night, there he is. There's Goliath. 40 days just go on. Morning and night, morning and night. What's the effect on you?
It's a psychological effect for sure.
Yeah. Meanwhile, back in Bethlehem, this is verses 17 and 18.
And back at the ranch, Jesse said to his son David, take an ephah of this parched corn and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and carry them quickly to your brothers in camp. Take these 10 cheeses to the captain of their 1,000. Find out how your brothers are and bring some token from them. Saul and the brothers and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah in the war against the Philistines.
Okay. Now, I don't know if you can see this or not. So this is a picture of the valley of Elah. And this is that Tel Azaka that we were talking about. In other words, well, let me put it this way. The easy way to say this, in the middle, this is the valley of Elah, that's them and that's us. And there's Jerusalem. Jerusalem is about half a mile away, southwest of this. So if you have anybody been to the valley of Elah? Yeah, Terry has. We went with Rabbi Danziger on that trip, and it's there. There are two hills or mountains and a valley in between them. And they were on one hill and we were on the other. And if you've looked at the stones, these are not pebbles. There's a slingshot with a stone in it. So you can see this, and these stones are as big as your fists, right, Terry?
No, they're big, yeah.
Yeah. So this isn't a little pebble he threw at him.
He wasn't playing.
Right, that's right. All right. Lesson, how to be a good child. Verse 20, 21, and 22.
Somebody else want to read? I'm happy to read, but okay. Early
Okay.
next morning, David left someone in charge of the flock and took the provisions and set out as his father Jesse had instructed him. He reached the barricade as the army was going out to the battle lines, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up their battle lines opposite each other. David left his baggage with the man in charge of the baggage and ran toward the battle line and went to greet his brothers. He didn't hide among the baggage, as you will notice.
Good.
While he was talking to them, the champion, whose name was Goliath, the Philistine of Gath, stepped forward from the Philistine ranks and spoke the same words as before, and David heard him.
Let's go back to what Terry started us with. Why did he get up early? It says in verse 19, I'm sorry, verse 20, he arose early. What do you get to, why early? Is it simple answer? Maybe I made it to her. He's obedient to his father.
And his brothers needed some food.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the message here, the lesson is, do what your parents tell you. Now, left the sheep with a watchman and left the baggage with a baggage keeper. What does that tell you?
They were getting ready to fight. They couldn't carry all that baggage with them.
Why do we have to know this? What kind of person was David?
Very responsible, because he didn't want the things to get lost.
Arian's right. This is not just, well, what happens, happens. David is responsible for everything he does. And what it does, it tells you, it's kind of a Harry Truman thing. Do right or be put right. Anyway, to make a long story short, he ran to the line. Why is he running?
He's facing the battle. That's not the last time we're going to see him do that.
Right. And he's pleasing his father. Mm-hmm. He wants his father to be proud of him. It says, when he arrived, why this? Verse 22 says he inquired as to the welfare of his brothers. I mean, he was focused. David is a person who's focused. Mm-hmm. So is our David here.
Okay. And I think Joe highly organized and with critical thinking skills. If I do this, this is going to happen. If I do this, this is going to happen.
Yeah, no small talk. Get to the point.
Yeah.
How many times have you told somebody, get to the point? David gets to the point right away. Okay. Now, David meets Goliath. Read 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27.
While he was talking to them, the champion, whose name was Goliath, the Philistine of Gath, stepped forward from the Philistine ranks and spoke the same words as before, and David heard them. When the men of Israel saw the man, they fled in terror. And the men of Israel were saying among themselves, do you see that man coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The man who kills him will be rewarded by the king with great riches.
That's where Terry was going with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
He will also give him his daughter in marriage and grant exception to his father's house in Israel. David asked the man standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills that Philistine and removes the disgrace from Israel?
What do you think of that? What's he after? Terry?
I think he's, what's in it for me?
There you go. Go ahead. Please continue.
Who is that uncircumcised Philistine that he dares defy the ranks of the living God? The troops told him in the same words what would be done for the man who killed him.
Yeah. So and so will be done. Okay. Remove disgrace from Israel. What's the lesson for today for us? Was he only there for his brothers? I mean, he said, this is what you do. Go get this, give this food to your brothers. Was that his only concern?
No, he was concerned for Israel.
Isn't it our concern? Maybe David's giving us a little message here. But why uncircumcised Philistine?
He wasn't protected by the covenant.
Right.
If he was
Right.
uncircumcised.
And David did not have an inferiority complex.
No.
We Jews have unfortunately bought into an inferiority complex. We won't go into how and why and when, but the lesson is we put ourselves down too much.
Mhm.
I mean, this is the ultimate insult. Uncircumcised. You're not one of us. You're not worthy. You're not part of the covenant. Okay? And it disgraces the battalions of the living God. Now we're away from this physical, here's your food. That's Daddy sent me with food. Here's your food. Goodbye.
Mhm.
Who is David protecting now?
Israel and God. And
Yeah, go ahead.
if you'll look here at the contrast between when we first saw, this is our really first good glimpse of David. But look at the contrast of when we first saw Saul. Now,
Yep.
first thing we've got is 40 days Saul has let this go on. For 40 days, a month and a week, this has gone on. And David knows that this has gone on forever. We have Saul who, and it's interesting that this writer brings out the baggage, that David left his stuff with the man who held the baggage and then ran out to the battle. But when we first saw Saul, he was hiding among the baggage.
Right.
And then we see Saul here afraid to do anything with Goliath. And now we see David, who is not only feeling defensive and taking care of David, but also defending Israel, which is what the king is supposed to do, and defending God's honor.
Yeah.
And the contrast is just.
Yeah. Where is Saul in any of this?
Very good. Twice a day, he gets it. Morning and evening. Here comes Goliath. Where is he?
He's in his tent. The battle.
Yeah. David is not only protecting his brothers and Kalal Yisrael, David is protecting God's name. What is the first line of the Kaddish in English?
Glorified God.
Yep. Glorified and sanctified be God's name. We do it every week. David's doing it ahead of us. That's what's going on here. We are the battalions of God. And I think Richard's pointed this out many times. That I don't know, it's about the Lord of hosts. Yeah. What is a host? He's not throwing a party. It comes from the Latin hostis, which means hostilities. We are in God's army. We really are soldiers. Our Christian friends have this onward Christian soldiers.
Right.
Yeah.
That is what we are. We are God's soldiers.
That word host used to confuse me a lot when I was a kid.
Yes.
Because it was never explained to us that was a military host.
I mean, think of it.
I have to tell you, I did wonder why we were blessing people that invited us to parties.
Well, the interesting thing, what if we had written the Torah the way it really translates? And this Song of the Sea, blessed are the God of the army. Doesn't really sit well. It's hard to play that and pray that. So the Lord of hosts, there you are. So verse 26, what's the question David's asking?
What's in it for me?
Yes, what's in it for me? What did Hillel say? The first of the three-part Hillel quotation?
If I'm not for myself, who will be for me?
Yeah, David, you have to be for yourself. You don't want to be for yourself only, but you certainly, the message here that David's giving us, that Hillel gave us, is we matter as individuals. We matter as a people, but each person matters. David gives us that example. Okay.
It's kind of amazing how fearless he is.
Yeah. Who said that? Carolyn?
Carolyn.
Yeah, what do you think about that? That's a very important point.
How
He's a-
old is he?
He's
How-
a little, he's a nothing. He's a shepherd.
Teenager. He's a
He's a
teenager. at this
teenager?
point.
Oh.
Yeah.
He's a teenage boy, that's right.
He is. And
mean-
and he's outraged at the disgrace. And I think you know, nobody else seems to see this as a disgrace. They've been there mired down in this and in the middle of this for so long. It takes David, who hasn't been there for 40 days, looking at it from the outside saying, why are you letting this disgrace go on? Yeah.
What does this say about risk taking and teenagers?
Carolyn, very good. Tell us a little bit more.
Well, that's
Yeah, should.
all throughout history that has been a problem and a blessing. You know, how old was Alexander the Conqueror? He was
33 when he died.
Yeah, but when he was out there didn't he start as a teenager?
He didn't. Must have been 17, 19. Yeah. The
So
risk.
Sometimes you need somebody who is risk averse.
I was wondering, they say that the human brain does not get to be adult, let's say, until age 25.
Mhm.
So basically, there is an inability for a teenager before that age to see danger the way older people see
Yeah.
it.
What do y'all? That's very, Ellen. Thank you. That's very important. What do you all think of that?
And what is the thing about you're not responsible until what age?
25.
Well, here's an interesting question. How old were Adam and Eve when they were created?
Mm,
Don't know.
that's a trick question.
It is a trick question.
Probably before the age of 20, being at the prime of their life.
Very nice. The way it works in Judaism is that between the age of birth and bar bat mitzvah, you're not responsible. I mean, you're an quote animal, end quote. I mean, you got to be treated as that. Between 13 and 20, you're working your way through this. One day you're a child, one day you're an adult. But when you're 20, you are, in other words, from 13 to 20, you're responsible, but you can't be punished. But when you're 20, you can be punished. And that's how we know that Adam and Eve were at least 20 when they were born.
Or at least 20.
Rush.
And Joe, could it be that David had something to prove? He's the youngest with his brothers. He's relegated to the lesser position, and he wants to show that he can do something great.
Marion's question is a very deep question. What does a child do that is ignored by his father?
Yeah, he does. And let's also not forget, he's already been anointed at this point. He's been anointed by Samuel as king. And it says in that scene where he's anointed, and we don't talk about this very often, but it says, as soon as he was anointed, the Spirit of the Lord gripped David from that day on.
Yeah.
And so David was different. God was clearly was empowering him.
Well, you would surely be more assured that you were going to be successful if you'd just been anointed king, because
in front of all your brothers,
that you wouldn't immediately die and not become king after you were anointed.
What do you think?
So that would give you a certain level of assurance right there.
He's been chasing down wild beasts as a shepherd, you know.
Right.
Good.
That's how he got so good with the sling, you know.
Now, if you'll read 28 and 29, I think we'll get to the crux of this.
Okay. One question. Is the implication here that after the 40 days of war, the Israelites were losing, and if it had not been for David, they would have lost altogether?
Or they'd still be standing there. Just listening to Goliath every day.
Yeah, pretty terrifying. Okay. All right, let's see what 28 and 29 say.
When Eliab, his oldest brother, heard him speaking to the men, Eliab became angry with David and said, "Why did you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your impotence and your impertinence. You came down to watch the fighting." But David replied, "What have I done now? I was only asking." And he turned away from him and towards someone else. He asked the same question, and the troops gave him the same answer as before.
What other stories in the Bible come to mind in Torah, for example?
Joseph.
Joseph.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
What about there's a midrash. What about the serpent in the Garden of Eden? Was he jealous of Adam? What do you think? It's a midrash. He wanted Eve and Adam had it. It's a long midrash. Anyway, what about Cain and Abel? Sarah and Hagar, Jacob and Esau, Rachel and Leah, Korah and Moses. It goes through the whole human experience. So being loved is not really a good criterion for leadership. Being respected is. So how do younger brothers usually respond?
Just like David did. Seldom
Yeah.
see the way the rest of the world does.
And look at Dave. What is he? He's imitating John Travolta in Welcome Back, Kotter. What? That's his right friend. What? What? See? Now? So what does it mean he turned away from him?
Turned his back on him.
Okay, physically and
Mentally and emotionally.
yeah, you can't let others make decisions for you. He turned away from the advice. I'm not a baby anymore. Remember, you use the words independent destiny. It's how you make decisions. Now Saul finds out. This is chapter 17, verses 31, 32, and 33.
The things David said were overheard and were reported to Saul, who had him brought over. David said to Saul, "Let no man's courage fail him. Your servant will go and fight that Philistine." But Saul said to David, "You cannot go to that Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy, and he has been a warrior from his youth." David replied to Saul, "Your servant has been tending his father's sheep, and if a lion or a bear came and carried off an animal from the flock, I would go after it and fight it and rescue it from its mouth. And if it attacked me, I would seize it by the beard and strike it down and kill it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and that uncircumcised Philistine shall end up like one of them, for he has defied the ranks of the living God. The Lord," David went on, "who saved me from lion and bear, will also save me from that Philistine." "Then go," Saul said to David, "and may the Lord be with you."
Okay, now think about it a minute. Lions and tigers and bears. Oh my.
Oh my.
That's what David said, lions and bears. He left out the tiger. But think about this. We tend to think of a shepherd as a kind of a passive, he's sleeping there playing his flute. But if you think about it a minute, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me, the shepherd. This is God protected David as a shepherd. David is protecting God as God. What do you think of that? What
David certainly gives God the credit.
Yeah, and he gives him the credit for causing Saul's melancholy too.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the writer of this, yes, does, yes.
It's hard for us to do this, to be this bold. We have a hard time saying emotzi if we're at a restaurant. It's embarrassing. This David, and we tend to, who was a shepherd? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses. They were all shepherds. They were not weaklings. Okay. So David refuses the armor. Let's read 45, 46, and 47.
David, no,
On that day.
you
No,
mean the
that-
armor? Okay, yeah, that's, I think,
Yeah.
30,
I tell you what,
where Saul clothed David in his own garment.
I wanted to get where David.
David replied to the Philistine.
Yeah,
David replied to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the ranks of Israel, whom you have defied. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hands. I will kill you and cut off your head, and I will give the carcasses of the Philistine camp to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the earth.
pretty
All
rough.
the earth shall know that there is a God in Israel. And this whole assembly shall know that the Lord can give victory without sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will deliver you into our hands."
So who gets the credit? Who does David want to get the credit for it?
God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lord.
Good. God's going to do the delivery. He's doing this, it says, so that the whole earth will know that there is a God in Israel. What do you think of that? And the rest of the story, 18 through 54, it's a long story. But you want to finish that up for us? This is 17 verses 48 through 54.
Let's say something about the armor while we're at it, and
Please.
refusing the armor.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't find that. I had that in here.
Yeah, it's in 38. It's starts at verse 38, Joe.
Yeah. 1,000 years ago.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Please, yes.
1,000 years ago in the Middle Ages, we have all these knights in armor. And this was protection to a point.
Yep.
It also slowed them down. This is a teenager and he wants to move very quickly.
Yep.
With that armor, he can't move with the speed he wants to move.
And
And we also have
Saul being a
this-
big man, that armor wouldn't fit him.
that's what I was going to say. We have the size thing again, with
Yeah.
Saul being this tall guy, and we have David. It talks about, being slight. And yeah, that had to have been a comical scene.
All right, let's look at page 7 in our book, or the first paragraph. Saul has been left.
What page?
7.
It's on.
Saul has been left with no other volunteers. He fits the young man with his armor. In a scene heavy in all senses with symbolism, David is unable to maneuver in Saul's armor and strips it off. Garments will play a role throughout the story. When Saul pursues David, David will, unbeknownst to the older man, cut off a piece of Saul's coat so that he can later prove to Saul that he was close enough to kill him. When Samuel ultimately strips Saul of the kingship, Saul will grab at a piece of Samuel's cloak, which the Hebrew word coat, beged, is related to the Hebrew word for betrayal, baged. Clothes unmake the man.
Sometime we may want to have a session on clothes in Judaism. We're talking about Tamar and the clothes in Judaism, Joseph's coat. It's a big thing in the Torah. But anyway, very interesting. This is from Judges. If anybody wants to turn to it, take you a moment. Let me just read it to you. It's just one sentence. Okay. It says here, this is the children of Benjamin. It says, among these people, there were 700 left-handed men, all of whom could sling a stone and a hair and not miss. What do you think?
Say left-handed men?
Uh-huh. It's pretty well documented. Left-handed people are smarter in general than right-handed people. We don't know why. It's just tests have been on and on and on.
I can vouch for that.
How many lefties are in here?
Well, there a lot of presidents are left-handed. Reagan was left-handed president. Truman was. Gerald Ford was. It's peculiar. It makes no sense.
I think Bill Clinton was Bill
In
Clinton.
there,
Yeah.
yeah, Bill,
George
that's
W.
right. Barack Obama is left-handed too. Something is now I'm going to say a foot. I mean a hand.
But to my, most of the left-handed presidents have been the more recent ones. The early ones, I don't think they were there any back in the Patriot days, the early presidents?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, Thomas Jefferson was. He had injured his right hand. He had to learn to use and did use his left hand.
Huh.
But there was such a stigma in those days too about
Yes,
left-handedness.
They tried,
That children were taught were discouraged from using their left hand.
That's right.
Yeah, the Italian word for left is something that
Sinister.
Sinister.
evil.
yeah, and that's exactly right. The idea here is that if you're facing an enemy, you're going to watch his right hand
Mhm.
because that's where he's going to throw something. Suddenly, his left hand, you're not watching. The best interpretation I can.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, why baseball players use left-handed pitchers.
Southpaws.
The Chinese had a different interpretation
Yeah,
of the
right.
right hand and left hand situation.
Oh, tell us.
In China, no matter what your tendency is, you have to operate chopsticks with your right hand.
Really?
Of course, there would be a practical reason for that, of course, because if you have someone going the wrong way at a table full of chopsticks, you're going to end up in someone's eye. But even beyond that practical reason,
Wow.
Huh.
the right hand is considered to be the clean hand that you eat with, and the left hand is the dirty hand, and you use that to clean up after you use the bathroom.
It's
And it's that way in many Middle Eastern countries as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or Benjamin is the son of my right hand. Benjamin. But anyway, that's the left-handed people have gotten the raw deal on this, and when they certainly study after studies have shown that they're more intelligent.
But when you hear people sitting at the right hand of God, you never hear it said anyone is sitting at the left hand of God.
That's right. And we won't. I'm glad we're doing this discussion now and not in November.
Yeah.
Ah.
Right and left have a whole new meaning. Yes.
Different, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting what we've assigned to our verbs, nouns, and adjectives, and the idea of what is right and left. There's a cute little anecdote. A woman goes to the train station and says, "Young man, which way is the train to Chicago?" He says, "Well, go to the left and you'll be right." She said, "Don't be so impertinent." He said, "Okay, go to the right and you'll be left." Anyway,
Did you when you did the thing on angels, was there an angel that sat to the left of God?
yeah, there are 4 angels. Oh my gosh, Uriel, Raphael. What? Terry, help me.
Michael is one of them.
Michael, Uriel. Gosh, I'm blocking.
Raphael.
Gabriel, Myrna is right. Yeah, and I forgot who's. And when the some of the Orthodox Jews at night, their prayer is, "This angel to the left of me, this to the right of me, before me, and God is above me." So yeah, they. I think I wish I could remember who's on first, but I don't know.
Who's on first, what's on second, and I don't know who's on third.
That's right.
That's right.
I don't give a damn is right field.
Huh?
You think
And I don't give a damn is right field.
That's good. Now,
you think at this point, if we had met David, we would have liked him?
oh, that's an interesting question. Why is that a good question?
It just is.
Because no, that's very important, Dante, because everybody loved David. Saul loved him, his daughter loved him, his son Jonathan loved him. Everybody loves him. David goes with the Philistines for a while. They love him too. Everybody loves David. And that's what the word David means, is
Beloved.
beloved. Gotta love him.
Mhm. Goliath didn't
No
love
matter
him,
what he
but
does, God is always with him, and God loves him.
Mhm.
How do you explain that? I don't know. But whatever David does, whether in our eyes is good or bad or right or wrong, God loves him. And God's not going to let him down. And somehow David seems to know it.
Yeah.
That's a great question. That's very important. And we have this idea of large and small. We have large people. We have Goliath, Eliab, Saul. David's small, but he's beloved. What about us as a people?
We're small.
God's hand shows. We are 0.05% of the world. You round that off, you get
Nothing.
zero. That's about 300 years ago. King Louis of, I think, the 14th of France asked his advisor Blaise Pascal. He says, "Give me proof of God." And Pascal says, "Well, that's easy, your Majesty. The Jews. The Jews." We don't want to get a big head on this, but the idea here is that David is beloved. Still today, he's loved. Not just then, but throughout the centuries, throughout the millennia, David's loved. But what about David and Jonathan? Somebody read 17, chapter 17, verse 57. 1757, Mary.
Yeah.
It's a good year. Um,
It's the chapter 17, verse 50.
yeah, verse 57.
Huh?
Okay. So when David returned after killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him to Saul with the head of the Philistine still in his hand.
Uh-huh.
That's rather gruesome. Saul said to him, "Whose son are you, my boy?" And David answered, "The son of your servant Jesse the Bethlehemite."
Okay. What about that? Whose son are you? He sent for me. Is Saul aging? Is
No.
Saul thing he saw? Did he call? Did David been there playing the flute? Don't know. What about chapter 18, verses 2, 3, 4, and 5? And then we'll finish this up. Well, 1 through 5. Chapter 18.
When David finished speaking with Saul, Jonathan's soul became bound up with the soul of David. Jonathan loved David as himself. Saul took him into his service that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Jonathan and David made a pact because Jonathan loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the cloak and tunic he was wearing and gave them to David, together with his sword, bow, and belt. David went out with the troops, and he was successful in every mission on which Saul sent him, and Saul put him in command of all the soldiers. This pleased all the troops and Saul's courtiers as well. When the troops came home, and David returned from killing the Philistine, the women of all the towns of Israel came out singing and dancing to greet King Saul with timbrels, shouting, and sistrums. The women sang as they danced.
Good. Now look at this. Whatever David did, says whatever he did, it didn't matter where Saul sent him, he was victorious. It says, over all the warriors, he was the commander in chief. He was the Eisenhower. It says he was good in the eyes of all the people and in the eyes of Saul's servants. And then after slaying the Philistines, that the women from all the towns of Israel came out to see him. Wow. Huh? What do you think of it? And then we get it made everybody mad, at least Saul mad. Let's do 7 through 9.
Well, if you look at what the women were singing, they were singing, Saul has slain his thousands, David his tens of thousands. That's not going to make Saul happy.
Ah, go ahead. Yeah. And you'll just finish reading that paragraph there.
Saul was much distressed and greatly vexed about the matter, for he said, to David they have given tens of thousands, and to me they have given thousands. All that he lacks is the kingship. From that day on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. The next day, an evil spirit of God gripped Saul, and he began to rave in the house, while David was playing the lyre as he did daily. Saul had a spear in his hand, and Saul threw the spear, thinking to pin David to the wall, but David eluded him twice. Saul was afraid of David, for the Lord was with him, and had turned away from Saul.
Now Saul doesn't have God on his side anymore. He tried to kill David twice. It wasn't just an accident. I'm sorry, my spear slipped.
Okay, when that happens.
Yeah.
It was loaded.
And well, we are out of time. Next time we'll think about this a minute. The future for Saul, for Jonathan, for David, and the children of Israel. What's going to happen? We'll do that next time. We'll go into David we will do David as lover and husband, and we'll find out what really happened here. What did Saul do after he missed him twice with the spear? Any questions?
So this is the cliffhanger to bring us back next week.
I hope so.
Then all this will happen next week.
To be continued.
So the Hillers will not be here next Sunday.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We'll
Well,
be on our way back from Nashville.
oh, okay. Well, we'll miss you. Thank you all very much for coming. You all did great today. This is
Will we be in person next week, Joe? Will we be in person?
Hopefully.
good
at
question.
Temple?
I'm going to say in person, if I know the temple. There's no really reason not to.
Mm-hmm.
They want to bring people back in, which I think is good.
Dr. Levy, were you asking which sides the angels were on?
Yeah.
Okay, Michael on the right,
Right.
Gabriel on my left hand, before me Raphael, and behind me Uriel, and above me Shekinah.
They should keep many Orthodox prayers at bedtime consist of, and it gives you confidence, like David.
And that's not very helpful to the Mormons who just had the angel Moroni, who was, was there hovering around when Joseph Smith was finding the golden tablets. And the angel Moroni isn't mentioned there at all. He must have been a lesser angel.